they had.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Gateway Online series. These conversation cafes will capture topics that are pretty applicable to most people. But this series is called "Not Eligible for PDD." Now what? And the series is mainly for caretakers, caregivers, individuals that are not eligible for PDD due to various reasons. And the resources for this population is few and far in between. Today, we have Margaret Archibald. She's the agency manager of Four Directions Financial Bank, housed in Boyle Street Community Services. She's also the manager of identity services within the bank. Both the banking services and the ID services are designed for individuals receiving age or income support. This means that the services have taken into account accessibility, education, empowerment, one-on-one supports, transient lifestyles, social distancing now, and interpretation services. Margaret will cover how one can obtain the status card if they identify as First Nations, Métis, or Inuit, on top of everything else that she's going to talk about today. And there's opportunity for Q&A. Margaret, do you want to share your screen and take it away?
All right. Good evening, everyone. My name is Marg. I prefer to be called Marg as to Margaret. And so I do want to welcome you all here this evening. The way I'd like to proceed is to start with talking about identification and how you can access identification and how we can assist you in accessing that ID. And then following that, moving into Four Directions Financial Services and how you can open a bank account. And if you have any questions around what that might look like, any concerns you have about what kinds of services that we offer through the bank, feel free to ask questions throughout if you want to. And then definitely at the end, we can even, talk a little bit more if you want to access more information, how you can contact myself or contact our ID services coordinator. So I'm going to share my screen with everyone with a PowerPoint presentation on identification. And just give me 1 second here. Okay. So the PowerPoint is called A Guide to Identification. What I'm going to do is just basically go through the kinds of identification that we deal with on a regular basis and how you can access those. So the first, a little bit of history. Boyle Street Community Services was established back in the 1970s. And there were a lot of different individuals who came to receive services. And one of the things they constantly talked about was not having access to ongoing identification. So we've really kind of grown with the community and discovered what the real barriers have been for them. And in 2011, we decided to start the Edmonton Safe Identification Storage Service. It's a long title. To assist people in acquiring identification and maintaining their personal ID. And that means that we offered a specific place for people to store their identification if they didn't have a safe place, such as maybe a safety deposit box, or they had a safe apartment or home they could keep it stored in. Many of our community did not, so we felt that offering them something like it's almost like a storage locker where they can leave their ID with us, they sign it in, sign it out, and it's maintained for them over as long a period of time as they require. To date, we usually see about 2,200 clients annually, and we store right now approximately 2,000 documents, files for different clients. So we've really grown over the years, and people have come to really trust us and what we offer in that service. There were three main goals that we had as an organization. The first goal was to provide knowledgeable information about acquiring ID and assist in its acquisition. So you can come just simply to ask questions, or you can come and ask for assistance in making the applications themselves. We also wanted to foster early access to programs and services for individual clients, because we felt as we grew to understand how identification was affecting clients, that they were not gaining access to services and programs that they required in a timely way if they didn't have those IDs in hand. The other thing is we also continue to grow in our partnerships. So we are always looking for other partners who are interested in working with us on identification and assisting our community in a broader spectrum of issues and concerns around ID. So as I said before, not having ID is a significant barrier, and it can prevent individuals from accepting or accessing, I should say, a wide range of community and government services. Some of those are accessing a food bank. Actually, the first thing they will ask you for is your healthcare card. Renting a home or an apartment, landlords now really require individuals to show identification prior to signing leases. They really are wanting to know who is coming into their building, and if you don't have that, sometimes they actually will refuse to allow you to even make an application for an apartment. Securing employment. Of course, we know that most employers today require you to have ID. Opening a bank account. At most banks today, I would say at the majority of them, you cannot open a regular, just direct deposit account without having two pieces of government issued ID, one being a photo ID, because of so much identity fraud and identity theft. So it's becoming a real important aspect to people's lives. And also now accessing a low-income bus pass. It's becoming more and more prevalent that they're requesting identification before you actually access that. You can do so though through your social service agency, or we can also assist you in getting you on a list for accessing that low-income bus pass. We know now that receiving medical tests and medical appointments, they require you to have two pieces of ID. Even for blood work, you have to have a photo ID and your healthcare card. So it's really getting to be just a normal thing. And of course, accessing AISH or Alberta Works Income Support. They have reduced restrictions a little bit on this, as long as you can have, I think your social insurance number is one of the main pieces of ID they look for when you're making application for support. But all of these areas, and these are not the only ones, these are really important areas for people to access supports within the community. Without that ID, often you're denied those benefits. So to make more of a seamless access to ID services, one of the things we found was that we needed to tap in to the registry business. In Alberta, it's one of the few provinces where they have privately owned and operated registries within Alberta. To assist our clients, we wanted more of a seamless approach. So Boyle Street has partnered with AccuSearch, and AccuSearch is a license and registry service. It's located on the second floor of the city center mall downtown on around Jasper. And we've been really blessed to have this partnership. This is an office of workers who really understand our vulnerable community, who really appreciate the work that we do, and they will work very hard to assist you in whatever you're trying to work through. They totally understand that ID acquisition can be very complicated and frustrating for many, many clients, and sometimes even for us when there's some real oddities that arise and we haven't been prepared for that. They're a great place for getting some really good up-to-date information. So it's great to have that partnership. So AccuSearch is definitely a key partner for us right now. So I just wanted to let people know that there are 5 main pieces of identification that clients generally come to seek from us. But these are not the only ones. They are the ones I will kind of focus on tonight, but there are other IDs as well. But those are more on an individual basis that we would ask you to come and speak directly to us, and maybe we can help you problem solve on how you can gain access to those IDs. But these 5 specific ones are really the general ones that most people are seeking. And that is the Alberta Healthcare Card, birth certificates, government issued photo IDs, such as the Alberta ID card and the Alberta driver's license, a status card for our First Nations clients, and also the social insurance card. So those 5 identifications really are the key IDs that most people come and ask us about and seek our assistance with. Is there any questions, Karen? Anyone?
No, I'm good. Yeah.
So one of the areas that a lot of people struggle with is not knowing what to do once they lose their ID. And this is becoming, for us, it's a normal thing. People come in and say, oh, I've lost my wallet. So we're very accustomed to this. So knowing how to replace identification is actually almost as important as knowing how to get ID. So I just want to touch on that for just a few seconds. So if you lost your Alberta Healthcare Card, there are definitely 3 different ways for you to get a replacement, and you can get them rather quickly. The first one is by phone. The second one is to write to Service Alberta. And the third one is to just go to a registry in person. So each of these requests for a replacement also have some peculiarities attached to them. So with applying for a new healthcare card by calling in, and I've put the telephone number here. The telephone number is 780-427-1423. So that's Service Alberta. You would call in and just say that you lost your healthcare card and you would like to have a replacement. They're going to ask you for 3 specific things. They're going to ask you for your name, your date of birth, and the last address that a previous healthcare card was sent to. So hopefully you haven't moved. If you haven't moved and everything is the same, they will just send out a card to you in the mail. You will receive that card between 5 to 7 business days. However, if you have moved, that could be more of a challenge. What they might do then is they actually may send out to you a statutory declaration. So that's a document that on one side has a letter, it's addressed to you, and it's telling you how you can access to get a new card. The other side of that, the other flip side of that page is what they call the statutory declaration, and it has to be signed by a commissioner for oaths. Now, the registries can do that for people. However, they do charge an administrative fee of $10. Now, that fee is generally for the commissioner for oaths on their site to sign that document. We do not charge for that. So we always tell folks, if you need to have your statutory declaration signed for an Alberta healthcare card, just bring it to our office and we'll sign it for you. And it's just a matter of me putting my stamp on there and you signing off on that declaration with me. And then you take that form with you and you can either mail it back in or you can actually leave it with us. And Diana, our ID storage or ID service coordinator, will actually take that application physically over to Alberta, the AccuSearch office, where they can, put it in their request for an Alberta healthcare card. Once again, that card will only take about 5 to 7 business days for it to be delivered to whatever address you have on profile. Now, if you apply in person at a registry, they will request identification. So this is where we often have people coming to us more and more because they don't have the ID. So the first thing they're going to ask you for is a valid government issued photo ID. So if you don't have that photo ID and you have to sign a declaration, it's just as easy to bring it to our office. We can get it signed there. Diana will look after making sure it's delivered to AccuSearch for it to be processed. So that's just the healthcare card. I wanted to talk a little bit about as well for healthcare cards for people who are new coming into Alberta and those who have been in Alberta, received a healthcare card number, but then left maybe for a few years and then returned. So these are all a little bit more complicated in nature, but for a new applicant, if you have just come to Alberta, you have to be in Alberta for 90 days before you can apply for an Alberta healthcare card. And the reason for that is that each province and territory within Canada have a reciprocal agreement with one another. And that means that for myself, I came from the Maritimes, from New Brunswick. When I arrived in Alberta, New Brunswick still covered me for the first 90 days of my residency here. After the 90 days, I could apply for an Alberta healthcare card. And that is with every province and territory. So you're covered for your healthcare, but you're covered by your previous province for the first 90 days. So that's something to remember if it's a new application. If you're returning to Alberta, you will need to reapply to have your Alberta healthcare number reinstated. Some people think that, oh, I can leave and then just come back, but that's not how this works. And often they will find out if they do have to go and seek medical attention, that sometimes they'll be told that their healthcare number is not active. So it's a simple form. It's just the regular general form they would fill out. And on that form, there are some questions that ask about when did you leave Alberta? How long have you been away? When did you return? So those are the questions that will be answered on that form. So you have to tell them that you were in Alberta, you left and went maybe to New Brunswick, you stayed there for about 2 years, you came back and you arrived in Alberta on such and such a date. And once they get that application, they'll just reinstate the same number that you had previously. The Alberta healthcare number that is assigned to every person is the only number they will have. They will not be issued a brand new number. It will be the same number they had previously. So are there any questions around Alberta healthcare cards?
Nope.
Okay. Just jump in, Karen, whenever you feel like it.
Yeah, I will. I'm listening.
Okay. Our ID program also deals with every registry that exists within Canada. So no matter the province or territory that you were born in, the ID program can access a birth certificate for you. So there are a few things to remember with birth certificates. And the main thing is that you have to be able to provide all the relevant information that is requested on the application. Sometimes clients do not always know all of the information that a province is asking for. So let's just say in Ontario, they ask for actually the physician that delivered you, okay? Your parents may never have told you that. You may have nobody that knows that information, but that is the question they ask. They ask sometimes what hospital you were born in. They may ask what town your parents were born in. If that information, if we send that application off and that information does not match the birth registration, they will actually send that back to us. So it's really important to really try to get as much information as you need to acquire all the information that they're asking. And every application for every province is so different. It's just some of them are very basic, and others like Quebec and Ontario, they're really, really intricate. The other thing about Ontario and Quebec, they require a guarantor, which means that not only are you putting all the information in, you also have to have someone sign off on that birth certificate application that is listed in their list of guarantors. That could be a registered social worker, it could be a doctor, a banker like myself, it could be maybe a lawyer friend that you know, a minister, just there's a whole list, but they're very specific and they do follow up on checking guarantors, just so people are aware of that. So they will, if you put down a registered social worker, they're going to call the registry of social workers and ask if that person is registered. So they do follow up on these. The other interesting fact about birth certificates is that only the mother, father, or the individual whose birth certificate is being requested can make application for a birth certificate. So you can't, like, I couldn't go in and try to apply for Sahana's birth certificate. They would not allow me to do that. Only the mother, father, or the individual whose birth certificate is being requested can make that application. Now, under rare circumstances, sometimes if you're working with a social worker and you don't have all of the necessary identification to apply for that birth certificate, sometimes they will allow, there is a letter that sometimes can be sent on behalf of the applicant to that registry and ask if you could apply on their behalf. In Alberta, if you do not have a photo ID, you cannot apply for a birth certificate. So what we do is we ask clients, do you know anyone who has a valid photo ID? If they don't have a valid photo ID, then actually we will provide the assistance to get the application done, because Diana, our ID service coordinator, will apply on their behalf. But if you have a family member or a friend who has a photo ID and you just want to get on with this, you want to get on getting your ID, you can actually go to the registry in Alberta with that person who has the photo ID, and you can fill out your application, and your friend or family member with the photo ID can sign off as a guarantor for you. That will process your application quickly. The only downside is that when you go to pick that birth certificate up, that same individual who acted as your guarantor must be with you to pick it up. But it is, even if you don't have photo ID, there is a way for you to access birth certificates in the province of Alberta, and that's by having someone who has a valid photo ID to go with you to make that application. So there are some ways to work around getting the documents you need. So across Canada, the fees for birth certificates range anywhere from $20 to $55, depending on where you were born. And often, unfortunately, Alberta has the highest cost for birth certificates in Canada, unfortunately. But again, they have very quick service. So for instance, if you were to go into a registry before noon hour on a particular day, say Monday, and you were to go in and make application, you had all of the documentation you needed to do that, and you paid for your birth certificate, actually that birth certificate may be ready for you the following day towards the end of business day. You might be able to pick that birth certificate up. And that's not even paying additional costs. That's just a regular processing time. Recently, we have found that because of COVID-19 and the pandemic, they are quite a bit behind right now. So it might take an extra day or two for you to get that birth certificate. But in Alberta, 3 to 5 business days is usually the longest you would ever wait for your birth certificate to be able to go and pick it up at a registry. So that's pretty good in regards to a lot of other provinces. Any questions around birth certificates?
Nope, not for me.
Okay. So the next area I do want to look at is the area around government issued photo ID. So in Alberta, to get a photo identification, you have to have 2 pieces of ID. So a lot of our customers and clients say to us, it's so frustrating because you need identification to get identification. And we say, yes, unfortunately, that is the case. So in Alberta, to get a photo ID, you need an Alberta healthcare card, and you need a provincial or territorial birth certificate. With those 2 pieces of government issued ID, we call them non-photo IDs, you can either access an Alberta ID card or an Alberta operator's license driver's permit. So these 2 cards, they look exactly the same. The only difference is we call the Alberta ID card more of a walking ID. We say it's more of a pedestrian ID. It is not for drivers. It does not give you the privilege to drive under that identification card. The Alberta operator's license requires you, of course, to go through all of the requirements to get your license first. But that Alberta operator's license, it has the same weight as the ID card. One does not basically, outweigh the other. It just means that they serve two different purposes, one for drivers and one for non-drivers, but they have the exact amount of weight, and their validity is exactly the same based on your status. Oh, I'm just going to pop back one more second here. One of the things that you need to also remember is if you go in to get your driver's, your ID card or driver's license, they may request proof of mailing address or proof of residency in Alberta. You can show that by just bringing in a piece of mail, either a utility bill, a tax assessment bill, a lease, and this is just to confirm your residency in Alberta. And what they do is they match that to what you actually have on your ID card. So whatever the address is on the identification should match whatever you're bringing in to the office for registration. The documents that you bring in to show your proof of residency should not be any older than 90 days. So that 90-day period is something they ask, and I'm not sure why they say 90 days, but that seems to be something they say. So things that are mailed out within 90 days, it'll be accepted by the registry office just for proof of residency. And again, the cost of identification in Alberta, it's different than in some provinces, but in Alberta, you often when you go in, the registry wants you to purchase a 5-year. For many of our customers and clients, they can't afford a 5-year card always. So we let them know, if you go in and they automatically say, oh no, we can't give you a 1-year, you have to take a 5-year. They need to feel confident in telling them, listen, I know in Alberta, I can have a 1-year, a 2-year, a 3-year, a 4-year, or a 5-year ID card. And there's different costs per whatever the year is. So a 1-year is $15, and then it just goes up progressively. And I think it's $50 plus now for a 5-year card. The driver's license is a little different. They have been going up considerably to renew your driver's license or get a new card. A replacement card is not as expensive as just getting the card itself. But an Alberta operator's license can cost you anywhere from $80 to $100 and some dollars. And then the cost of replacing that card is usually between both of these cards, usually between $20 to $24. You can replace it if it's lost. One of the things too that people often forget about identification is that even if you lose it, it does not mean that it has expired. So we have a lot of folks, as I said, come in and tell us that they've lost their wallet, they've misplaced their ID. And there's a few simple steps that you can use to get that ID back. The first thing is if you lose your ID, you should always go to the police and let them know that your ID has either been lost or stolen. You really need to do that. And the reason for that is there is such a high increase right now on identity theft and identity fraud. And believe me, you do not want to try to prove who you are. And we have seen many cases where people have actually had to prove their own identity, and it's a very costly process. So we tell clients, please just go to your local police station. And a lot of them don't like going to the police because they're not always the friendliest. And some of them have seen them a little bit too often. And so what we tell them is, listen, just go, just be very blunt. I'm here to make a complaint that I've lost my ID. They'll provide you with a pink slip. With that pink slip, you can actually go to a registry and they will accept that pink slip as you saying that you do not have that original document, and they will look in the system, they will pull up your name, and they will find out that your ID is still valid. They may ask you for a piece of mail to prove your residency again, but they will actually replace that ID for you for a minimal cost. So it's important to at least go to the police and get that pink slip. It's a very quick process. You will have your card replaced again within 2 to 3 weeks. So it's a lot easier doing that than having to go through the process. If you've lost your wallet, you may have lost your healthcare card too. You may have lost other documentation. You can get the ID still replaced and still have at least the photo ID while you're working on replacing the other identification. The other thing I would do if you lose your ID is to certainly, if you're concerned about your identity issues or your financial issues, I would be contacting Equifax or TransUnion and asking them if there's been any activity on your profile with them that may not be appropriate, may not have been completed by you. Maybe someone stole your ID and now they're applying for MasterCards all over the place. It's important for you to make sure that you see that. And if you see it, you need to make sure that you do something, and that you'll get advice from the folks at Equifax and TransUnion to assist you in processing through that. But it's really important. Identity fraud and identity theft, it is one of the largest fraudulent activity in the world today. And it's unfortunate, but that is where we are at when it comes to, you know, trying to protect your safety. One of the other things that you can do to perhaps assist you is to look at possibly purchasing some very minimal insurance, identity fraud insurance, where they can alert you to activity that is being used under your name. And it's really important that you do stay on top of that, because once that gets out of your hands, it's really difficult to reel back and try to get, you know, recover from that. So we do really strongly advise people to protect themselves as much as possible. So at Four Directions, where we have our ID services, there is a step-by-step process right now that we have been able to gain and maintain with Alberta Works. So there is a step-by-step process that Diana and I use when a client from Alberta Works comes in to see us. So the first thing is, we would tell you, if you're with any of the offices within the Edmonton area or elsewhere within Alberta, and you require assistance with ID, we have made arrangements with Alberta Works for them to agree to cover the funding to pay for the identification that has been lost or that you need. So we ask that you come to see Diana or reach out to Diana and talk to her about that situation, about needing to replace identification, and that you're an Alberta Works or Alberta Income Support client. When you come to see Diana, she is going to provide you with what we call a funding request letter. That letter needs to go to the Alberta Income Support office that you actually work with. So if you work with the Northgate office, then you need to deliver that letter to the Northgate office. And it will take approximately 2 weeks for the funding to actually arrive at Boyle Street Community Services, and it goes into the accounting department. And then once they receive that, Diana is notified that their funding has arrived. And then we ask for clients to come back and check in with Diana within about a 2-week period and just say, has my funding arrived yet? Yes or no. And then Diana will proceed from there. So it usually takes about 2 weeks, sometimes 2 to 3 weeks for the funding to arrive from Alberta Works. And they will cover the replacement of a birth certificate. They will cover the replacement of a 5-year photo ID. So they have been really great at actually covering the cost of these IDs over the past number of years. And also, if mothers or fathers or parents together, if they require extra birth certificates for their children because they need them to go to kindergarten or whatever, they will actually cover the cost of those as well. So it's really helpful if you don't have the funds to pay for all of those birth certificates, because it is extremely expensive. And unfortunately, we find a lot of women are the ones who are left to be responsible to get those documents. And it can be extremely expensive for a single parent, especially, like I said, especially the moms who usually sometimes have 2 or 3 children plus themselves that they need birth certificates for. But Alberta Works has been very gracious and has been willing to cover the cost of all of that. So we do encourage people to access that funding request letter. Also, at your initial visit, Diana will check to see if you have your Alberta healthcare card. If you do, that's fantastic. She'll say, please keep that in a safe place, because in a few weeks' time, we're going to need that Alberta healthcare card along with your birth certificate to get the photo ID. If you don't have your healthcare card, Diana will immediately apply for you right there with you. And the process is very simple. She fills out the application for you. She asks a few questions, and then she will take a very simple picture with her camera. And it is not, that picture is not to go on the ID. It is a relationship we have with AccuSearch to say that you were physically in front of us applying for the healthcare card. And we just, Diana will take that and simply take it to AccuSearch, and they will process your application for you. So it really cuts down the amount of time that's involved, and we can get that because it takes about, like I said, 5 to 7 business days for the healthcare card to come in. If you're waiting for your funding, then everything will arrive about the same time. And then once funding has arrived, Diana will work with you to make your application for your birth certificate. So the healthcare card is first. She gives you the request for funding letter, which you would take to your worker at Alberta Works. And then once all of that arrives, she will start to assist you with the application for the birth certificate. And once the birth certificate has arrived, Diana will make an appointment with you to meet you at the registry to take your photo ID. And she will not release the birth certificate, nor will she release the new Alberta healthcare card yet until the photo has been taken. And that's an arrangement that we have with Alberta Works, because often people would come, pick up the birth certificate, and then the next day come and tell us they've lost the birth certificate. So here we are waiting again a lengthy time, and they have to request more funding to get that birth certificate covered again. So it's just an arrangement they've asked us to do. Just hold on to the actual documentation until they get the final step, and that is the ID at the photo, to get their photo ID at the registry. So it's a very straightforward process, and it's really helped a lot of people, and we really are appreciative that Alberta Works has agreed to allow us to utilize those funds. Any questions around the ID, the photo IDs? Okay, so the next thing I'm looking at here is the acquiring of the new status card for our Indigenous community. So we work in partnership with INAC, Indigenous and Northern Affairs Canada, to offer status card events. We generally offer those every 2 to 3 months. Lately, we haven't been able to because of COVID-19 and the pandemic, of course. But we have been partnering with them for a number of years now, and we normally see about 70 to 90 Indigenous persons during those events. We assist them in either registering if they have not registered before, and then we also assist them in making application for the new 10-year status card. And you do have to make an appointment, and usually you start with talking to Diana, our ID services coordinator, and she will do all the preliminary application work. She will tell you what you're required to have. And so when you come to that appointment, it's basically you walk in the door, the documents are all done, they take your photo, and you sign off on some documents that we have for you. And that's it. Then the documentation is given to the INAC staff. They take that and they send it off to Ottawa. And unfortunately, there is a bit of a wait of time for people to get that new card, but it's very similar to our driver's license and our Alberta ID card. So it's a hard card, it's security featured, and it does allow them to travel, ground travel over the border to the United States. So it's a significant card for our Indigenous community, and it also helps them in a lot of other ways too, with their medical, acquiring assistance in medical, and covering prescriptions and things like that. It's really important piece of documentation to have for them. The one thing that we always tell our Indigenous community is that for status cards, it is important for you to get the long form birth certificate. So in Alberta and every province now, all the birth certificates look exactly the same. The only thing that's different is across the top, it will say the province, but every birth certificate is exactly the same now. So there are 2 types, the long form or the short form. And the short form has just your own personal information on it. It has nothing about your parents. It doesn't have any information about who they are, where they were born, just your own information. The long form actually is the form that we generally ask most of our clients and customers to purchase. It doesn't cost any more than the regular birth certificate, the short form. and it does have the parental information on it, and often that is valuable information specifically for our Indigenous community, to know who the parents were, or even if there's only one parent on there, it's a starting point, especially if they're looking to be registered and to make application for the 10-year status card. So it's the long form birth certificate is really the way to go for anyone, actually, to have that information on hand. And the last card that I was going to talk about, of course, is our social insurance cards. They are actually given to, or the number actually is issued at birth now for Canadians. And you have to, though, they no longer make the cards. They haven't made those cards since 2012. So if you still have your card, you actually have a historical document, which is really kind of neat. If you don't, you can still get a document from Service Canada. And we recommend people to go to Canada Place and to, actually you have to take 2 pieces of ID, one being a birth certificate, the other being a photo ID. And if you bring those in and you request a copy of your social insurance card information, they will provide you with an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper, which can be laminated and definitely tucked away somewhere safe, that has your social insurance number on it. It will tell you that this is an official document, and it will state to you that you need to keep it in a safe and secure place. And social insurance documents are really vital for people who are attempting to get employment, but to do taxes, everything. Like, they're really a valuable piece of paper. Although, I mean, another piece of paper is something just for more people to lose. So we encourage them to just definitely that one to keep in storage, because they really don't need it for anything else but taxes or for employment purposes, and that's it. And other than that, no one else needs to know what that number is, and it can be kept safe and stored away. Generally, to go to Canada Place, you do need an appointment, so it's a good idea to either visit first and make the appointment, or call and make an appointment to visit Service Canada. And the last bit of information I did want to share is on immigration. Now, I know that there are a number of community members who do come from other countries and who were born outside of Canada, and who sometimes live in countries that don't keep the greatest records for registrations of births and things like that. And so it's really important that when they come into Canada, if they have documentation, to really keep that safe. Unfortunately, what we see over and over again is that a lot of our newcomers to Canada don't have the documentation that will allow them to access newer documents within Canada. And so that does create a little bit of a challenge in trying to assist them. But we are well informed. We do work on immigration issues in 3 areas. The first one being, if you need to verify your status in Canada, to either recognize that you're a refugee, recognize that you are a permanent resident, just to get some form of documentation to show what your status is, we can assist you in getting that letter. And there is a fee attached to that the client would have to cover. However, it's the application itself is a fairly simplistic process, but there is a bit of a wait time, because we're talking, it's a federal document, so you can wait anywhere from 3 to 6 months to get that verification of status in Canada letter or document. But it's well worth having, and actually it's required in some instances. The next document is the permanent resident cards. We really tell people, please don't allow your PR card to go and become expired, because once that happens and you don't have a photo ID from the province, then you're in a bit of a situation, and it means a lot more wait time. So PR cards are about $50. The application process is fairly simple again, and it's just really keeping that up to date is really, really important, but we can assist them in the application process itself. And the last area is, if someone comes to us and says, listen, I don't have any documentation whatsoever, is there any way I can get copies of stuff? And we say, actually, yes, there is a process called ATIP, and it's a $5 fee that the individual would have to cover And basically it's an application for information. And so what we do is we apply with them and we send out that application, and what they get in return is copies of anything that have been in existence in their immigration file. So it can take a while, sometimes up to 3 months for those documents to arrive, but they certainly will come, and it's at least a place to start. And we tell people, just be patient. When you're dealing with federal issues, you have to be very patient around immigration. Anything that's more complicated than that, if there's like court cases coming up around status, if there are court cases coming up around issues around, our deportation or anything like that, we generally will refer our clients to the Edmonton Mennonite Center for Newcomers. They deal a lot more with these kinds of situations and are very well informed. And they also have a network within the legal community to assist clients to work through those. So we do have referrals, and we do know lots of networking that we can do on their behalf, but we don't take on things that are well beyond our scope, and we don't pretend to be everything to everybody. But we can at least refer and give them a place to go to where they can get the support. And that's basically it for identification. I don't know if there's any questions at all around ID. Karen, if you have any questions, you can throw
No, I
them in.
haven't. No.
Mark, do you remember the question that Salim asked you around identity in the morning?
Oh, the one, if you can have more than one pieces of ID? Yes. Well, in the province of Alberta, for instance, if you're a permanent resident, the permanent resident card is definitely a card you can have, and you can also have a provincial ID. You can also have a passport. So there are multiple IDs that you can have in terms of photo IDs. The one issue, though, you cannot hold an Alberta ID card and an Alberta driver's license at the same time. You're either one or the other. So you're either a driver or you're not a driver. But there is the question around, can you have multiple pieces of photo ID? Definitely you can. I mean, everyone can have a passport. You can, if you're a permanent resident, or if you're Indigenous and you have a status card, that's another photo ID. But you can also have a provincial ID. So there are ways to work, and we often look at that and say, what's the quickest route to get you the photo ID? And generally it's through the province, because if you're waiting on other forms of like passports, they're a bit more complicated and time consuming, as well as permanent resident cards. But that doesn't mean that we stop and don't work on getting those cards for you, because it's really important that you do keep your PR card up and running, especially if you're thinking down the road of becoming a citizen, Canadian citizen. You want to keep and maintain those documents as well as you can, to just show the consistency of your attendance in the country and status in the country.
Is a scanned ID card still considered as valid?
A scanned ID card?
Yeah, so I'm just thinking about someone who may lose their wallet but somehow hold on to their phone.
Yeah.
Is there any app or anything that they can scan their ID into and then use that phone just like we use it for
well, for actually that's a very good question. Actually, so digitalized ID is not accepted at registries, unfortunately, which is really kind of crazy, because that's what they use, but they haven't gotten there yet. What they insist on is the physical ID. What we can do, if you have ID and it's on your phone, I will actually say, listen, can you email that to me? If you email that to me, we have a process called ID certification. Very few people use it. I'm trained, Diana's trained. Alberta Health Services at the Royal ALEC, they actually have a similar process that they can use, the ID certification process. And what we do is we use those copied documents to actually show that we know who you are, that you have had identification in the past, and specifically, even if it's expired, I can use it.
Mhm.
So a copy of a healthcare card, a copy of your passport, a copy of whatever you have, we will use, because
Mhm.
then we can verify you through those documents. And it just means that I pick the phone up and I contact Alberta Health and just
Mhm.
verify the number. I contact maybe the registry office and say, I'm just calling to verify on an ID certification that this person has an ID and this is the number that's on that ID. So as if we have copies of those, there is a process we can use.
Okay.
And the downside of that is that it allows you to have an ID card, and that's all you can get. You cannot get a driver's license with it. You can get an Alberta ID card for 1 year. They will allow the 1 year card while you're working on trying to acquire the original documents that you have lost.
Okay.
So that, but the scan, that's a very good question. That's the scanned documents. I generally say, please email them to me. I print them out. Diane and I use them. We do the ID certification process, and we will move forward from there to get the 1 year photo ID.
Okay. Okay.
So that's
Thank
a very good question. Anything else on ID?
Nothing that crosses my mind right now, but please
If
continue.
it comes up even later, just ask.
For sure.
Yeah, I thought maybe then what I would do is I would start the process of moving on to talk very quickly about the 4 directions.
Yes, please.
Yeah, I'm just going to stop sharing the,
Okay.
and I waited till the end. I think what I'll do is I will show the video now instead of at the end, and then
Sounds
I'll
good.
talk a little bit about acquiring the actual, let me see if I can pull this up. So this is, Karen, this is a video from 4 Directions itself.
Okay.
And it talks about the bank and the people that, the clients that we started with, and kind of the focus of what we use our ATB Financial 4 Directions institution for. It's really to help those who are in vulnerable situations and who
Okay.
really need assistance with bank accounts. So here we go.
I left my house at 15. I got kicked out at an early age. You know, I was having some family problems.
I was in foster care really young. I was foster care before the age of 3. My biological parents, they had so many addictions and problems. My mom, she just couldn't take care of us. We were all taken away.
It was rough. It was rough. I picked out of dumpsters. I slept behind dumpsters, slept in tents. Having to deal with the institutions that are downtown, the banks, you almost feel out of place. And when you walk in, you almost feel like that spotlight's going right to you, because you don't dress the same, you don't have as much of an income, and it's almost you almost feel quietly labeled.
It's sad to be judged on the state you're in, and especially when like that money was for like a shower, a hotel room. You know, it's almost like they take that from you.
When you're not able to access mainstream financial services, you're exploited in all sorts of ways. You get charged huge amounts of interest on any loans you might have, you get charged high fees for just cashing a check. They have to cash them all at once. And that means that they're carrying around large amounts of money in cash, which means that folk are often robbed for that. Or indeed, people are encouraged to spend it really quickly. It can be injurious to health too, because sometimes people maybe drink quite a bit. By having a bank they can put money in, it means that that money is safe, that they're less likely to be attacked for their money. And it also means that they have money throughout the whole month.
When you look at placing an organization in a community, it's got to make sure it reflects the community. And so it's probably the only bank branch in Canada that is fully biometric. And biometric solves lots of the issues that Four Directions customers have in terms of keeping and maintaining ID. And it works really well.
Our community members are like family. They come to us because they trust us. They have been able to share their stories, and I mean like deeply tell their stories. Some of our community members are buying GICs for the very first time ever in their lives, thinking of saving money. It's a very special place.
Some of the kind of messages or morals of the partnership between Boyle Street and ATB, and it has been a partnership, is that pretty much anyone and everyone should have access to financial services. We feel that's a really basic right and a necessity, and that's possible.
There's something about giving a voice to the voiceless and people who can't or don't know how to use their voice, I guess.
I don't know how to explain it. Except to say, it brings a wall down. You know, to understand, you know, and these people, you know, it makes them feel like they have a bank for them. This is my bank. This is for bank. This bank's for people like us.
So that's a little bit about Four Directions in terms of the financial side of our programming. So Four Directions Financial Services has been in existence for almost 4 years now. I've been with them from the very beginning. I was not a banker when they first opened. I actually was the ID service coordinator. That's why I know so much about identification. But they seconded me and asked me if I would be willing to take on this new role. It was a little bit challenging at first. It wasn't something I thought I would ever do. And so I worked with our partner branch, which is Oliver Village, Alberta Treasury branch. And I went there for about 6 to 7 months. I just worked with them every day to learn the business and to understand the complexities of just day-to-day operations of running a financial institution and understanding the security issues and so on. And after that, they said, okay, September's here, it's time for you to start. And we've been on site now, like I said, for almost 4 years. It's been a really great growing opportunity for Boyle Street community. We started out with only our own members within Boyle Street to see how well they would receive working with a financial institution like Alberta Treasury Branch and with the niche market that we were offering. It was very successful, and we were asked to begin to expand. So we had other nonprofit agencies like Bissell Center, HIV Edmonton, Mission, Hope Mission, the seniors organizations, to see if we would be willing to take on new clients outside of Boyle Street, which we did. And we're well over 2,500 clients now, and it's really been a wonderful opportunity for us to work with the inner city community, as well as the outlying areas now. We have people who come to us from Leduc, we have people from Spruce Grove and St. Albert and so on. So there's a vulnerable population everywhere, not just in the inner city. I think that's a misconception that we have, but we're specifically there to work with people who have barriers, who have faced a lot of challenges and just basic banking, and that's just to get a bank account opened. So we talked about identification before. When we first opened, if you had an Alberta healthcare card, that would allow you to open a bank account with us. And what we did was we used our biometrics as the second piece of ID. So essentially, we would open the account with the healthcare card, and then we would enroll you in our biometrics. And that was the security. So when we were first getting to know you, you would come in and you would sign in with the biometrics with your fingerprint or your retinal scan. And those are very individual pieces of identification, and no one else has them. So they're very unique to you and each individual. And so it was definitely and still remains a viable option for many of our community. Unfortunately, during COVID-19 in the pandemic, we weren't permitted to use the biometrics because it requires everyone touching, the devices, and they're not made to have to be cleaned with, disinfectants on a regular basis. It can wear down the screens and so on. So they're trying to come up with another form of ID. We've looked at facial recognition. We've looked at a multitude of different other options. But when the restrictions are, being relaxed a little bit more and more, we should be able to go back to just utilizing that. But as I was talking about ID, that we now have this, we have a relationship with the province. Anyone on AISH or Alberta Works, you can actually acquire a signature verification, and they will fax that directly to us. And with that document, we can open an account for you without any identification. And the reason for that is the province is now taking the risk of vetting the actual individual. So they actually do the identifying of the individual, and they send the documentation to us, and we rely on the risk management relies on that vetting by the province. So that usually means that most applicants have to have at least their social insurance number, I think, is the one piece of documentation the province likes to have. So they do use that as the one number that we would accept to go on and open an account for them. It does not require any other pieces of identification, although what we do is if you come in and you have no ID, we refer you immediately to Diana and start the process of actually working towards getting the rest of your identification, because we really want you to be independent and not have to just come to our location. And that's the downside. I mean, it's a good thing that you have a bank account. The downside is that you have to come as a face-to-face customer until you acquire the rest of your ID. And that means you can't bank at the closest ATB, Alberta Treasury branch to you. You have to come and see us. And it's not a bad thing because we can build that relationship. But at the same time, for convenience, everyone likes to go, to the closest financial institution they can to where, they need to access funds. But usually if people begin the process of getting their ID, we can usually have them self-managed, is what we call it, ready to go ATB wide within 2 to 3 months. And so it's an initial kind of struggle to just kind of, build that relationship and have to come in to see us to do your banking. But outside of that, it allows you to get your direct deposits for AISH or Alberta Works, which is what they're requiring now. And we're the only financial institution that can do that for us, for the clients to get that account opened. And so it's built a really good relationship with Alberta Works and AISH, and they call us all the time, or I'll call them and just ask questions and just, find out what's going on with this client, or is there an issue with their direct deposit? It was missed this month, or that's the kind of relationship we've built. And it's been very positive. It's something we can do to help our customers a little bit more. If you come in with your own identification, that's fantastic. There's no issues. You can open an account. The only thing we ask you to do is to verify where your income is going to come from. So if you're with Alberta Works or you're with AISH, we just say, can you just get them to send us a letter of confirmation so that we know your earnings are coming from them. We don't require anything big and fancy, just a simple letter to say that you're an AISH client and you do receive direct deposits. That's all we need. And then they can fax that to us as quickly as possible, and then we can have that account. If you have a photo ID and your healthcare card or a birth certificate, you're ATB wide. It means immediately you'll get your debit card. It means you'll be able to bank at any Alberta Treasury branch within the province of Alberta. And that gives you a lot more freedom and allows you to have a bit more ability to begin the actual managing of your own bank account. And that's what we like to see and we encourage. And so that's why we felt ID Services was really important to kind of be partnered with us in the bank. And that's where we store identification, is right in the bank itself. So it's not only secure, but it's also, when we're open, that means people can access it at any time. And so it means it's really beneficial for the clients. And that's the main focus for us. It's what can we do? We think yes first. And if there's a little snag, we try to work around it. Unfortunately, sometimes there is a history with some of our clients. So if they've had a previous history with Alberta Treasury branch, unfortunately, it depends on what that history is. If it's been a serious fraud, I probably am not going to be able to open an account. What I really recommend them to do is to talk to their worker. And if they've kind of burnt their bridges with all the other financial institutions, what we say to them is, look, if your worker will give you a check as opposed to a direct deposit, we will cash that check for you here, no charge. And as long as you can get documentation that we can put on the back of the check for when you sign it. Essentially, all we can verify those checks on the spot. It just is a phone call away. So it's not, we want to get them access to their money. At the same time, sometimes our hands are tied based on, what the compliance issues are within the financial institutions itself. So if they've had a history and it hasn't been a really positive history with Alberta, not Fort Erections, but Alberta Treasury branch, it may prevent us from opening an account. If they have had a history, but it's not red flagged on their system, then I definitely will still work with them. And I will tell them, I will open an account with you, but you have to work with me for the first few months as a face-to-face customer. And that issue around an empty envelope or whatever, I just need to let you know it's not appropriate. And if it happens again, there could be a concern around, your account could be jeopardized. So I'm taking a risk on you. I want to meet you halfway. If you can meet me, we'll work it out. Right. And so we use natural consequences at our institution. If someone does, do a fraudulent activity and it's caught and there's no losses, generally what I do is I have a conversation with them and I say, unfortunately now it means that, you lose your debit card, but you still have a bank account and you still get your direct deposit. It just means now you have to come and see us more. And that's okay, because we love to see you. But those are other financial institutions would probably just close the account altogether and say they don't want you as a customer. But we find natural consequences are usually a better way to proceed with many of our customers and clients, and it's worked really, really well. And we believe in giving second, third, sometimes fourth chances if we have to, and helping people to manage their funds. It's just, if it's new to people, it's very different. It's very difficult sometimes to understand, that, if you have a $1,500 deposit, but you take $1,000 out on the first day and you blow it, and you only have $500 for the rest of the month, and that was the first of the month, now you have to figure out how that $500 is going to last you for the next 30 days, And so we have those hard conversations with people, and we're not shy about that. But it's been a wonderful opportunity to grow with people and to see how well they've learned to trust us, and how they're willing to, even if they make a mistake, to work through it and to find their way out of it. So it's a place where we try to help each other in many ways. Any questions around accounts?
Nope.
Okay. So Hannah, do you have any questions? Oh,
Hi. I'm thinking about some of the questions that were asked earlier this afternoon.
oh yes.
Some caregivers would be interested in uh, perhaps restricting. I know it's a strong word and a harsh word, um, but if they're looking out for their loved one, they'd like to restrict how much money they can access and so on. Um, and uh, and of course, I'm not talking about situations where they may be guardians, but if they're not guardians, how can they work with the bank and perhaps unwilling client?
Well, we do what we call the hard conversations. So we do have conversations with many of our customers around daily limits. And we're very realistic. We understand that everyone, you know, when we open a bank account, we know that the funds are being used for a variety of reasons. Like maybe someone smokes, maybe someone, you know, drinks, maybe someone is looking after someone else, and so their funds are being shared between two people, and that really reduces how much they can actually spend through the month. We will sit down with them, and we do have heart to hearts around, you know, I think it probably isn't wise to take that much money out right today. Are you sure you need all of that? You know, we're opened again tomorrow and the day after that and the day after that. Maybe it's best if you only take a little bit out today and then come back and see, you know, if you really need to do any more withdrawals. And often what will happen is that we don't see them for a few days. They'll take out, maybe they asked for 500 and maybe they only take out 100, but we don't see them for a day or two. And so it means that that $100 went a little bit further than they thought it was going to go. But we also realize that if people take out $500, that money is going to go. It's going to disappear in whatever, you know, way and fashion. Usually we tell them, like, you know, sometimes if you have money in your pocket, you spend it a lot quicker than if you actually have to physically come in and withdraw it a little bit more. So you think twice about it, right? And then we say, so what are you going to be using it for? And we said, we know, like, we're not asking to be intrusive, but, you know, are you going to take, we notice with CERB, a lot of people are taking cabs. That is a luxury most of them never have. And so we're seeing them like traipsing all across the city, an $80 cab ride. That is not something that they should grow accustomed to, because that is not something they can afford on a regular basis. And so we often say to them, you know, the bus system right now is free. So you should take advantage of, if you can, take advantage of that free service, and don't be spending your money on a cab. If you definitely need the cab and you have an emergency or something, that's very different. Or if you're getting groceries and you can't carry them home, that's different. But if it's just to go shopping or go somewhere, you know, we're finding a lot of them are just using funds to take a cab ride, and they're just traveling all over the city. Some of them will go even to Wetaskiwin. We're talking, it's a very costly drive. And so we keep trying to talk to them openly about these questions and just say, you know, it's you should really think carefully about spending that kind of money on transportation if you have other means. And some of them do have other means. They actually take the bus a lot. So these are questions we do talk to them about, and we don't talk to them about, you know, we're not lecturing them. We're just saying, oh, have you thought about this? How much is your cab costing you? And they'll tell me, go, wow, like, wow, that's crazy. Like, do you think you can afford it?
Have you found that it's perhaps because of the just paranoia around COVID and public transit?
We haven't heard that said to us. Like some of our community are a little bit, they're even more paranoid, because that is their mental state. They're very paranoid anyways. They're very concerned about high intensity concern about everything. For our regular clients that come in, generally they don't, it's kind of sad, but most people are seeing this as a party time, unfortunately, right now. And they're not really that concerned about COVID. They're not really social distancing, which is a concern for us. And we try to educate that on check days and so on, like really social distance. So when you come to our location, When you come in, there's a security officer. You have to hand wash. There's a hand washing station. Plus, we take your temperature. If there's any thought or sense that you may be ill, you will not be permitted into the agency. And we have support teams from our nursing staff next door that will come, and they'll be with you, and they'll give you some advice or call transportation to come and take you to a testing site or something. But generally, what we see right now, most of our clients are actually at the expo. Are you familiar with the?
Mhm.
So right now, there's a huge day shelter that has been set up for
Right.
the inner city, and most of our clients attend at the expo. There's activities going on there. They have a lot of support staff from all over the inner city agencies. But those, we are finding a lot of people are migrating to the west end of the city right now. And I don't know if it's the cost of apartments are cheaper or if accommodations are a lot easier to find there, but we are finding there's a bit of a migration right now to the west end. Aside from those who frequent the expo site. But not a lot of concern about COVID, unfortunately.
Yes, I've heard both. I've heard the concern around COVID, and I've also heard that, when there's a community of people that are socially excluded
Yes.
and stereotyped against, this is their community. We may be seeing them as not maintaining social distancing,
Right.
but they only have each other. So I think
That is correct. And
there is
they've
that
been, I mean,
reality.
most of them have actually, what we're finding at the expo is that they're very, when they're there, they have a whole section that's set aside for people who are showing symptoms. And the community is very concerned about them. And there's a one thing you will see with the community that we deal with is there's a real concern for one another. We had individuals come in, maybe they didn't get their age payment, and they're a little bit upset. They'll say, what do you mean it didn't come in? And then, there's their neighbor next to them at the other teller, turns around and says, listen, here's $20. And don't worry about it. You don't need to give it back to me. Just don't worry about it. Like, we see a lot of that happening within our community. They support and care for one another in ways that a lot of times people wouldn't even think. And so, but we have seen a lot of challenges with the extra funds that people are receiving right now. And so we shared this earlier. There's been a lot of extra deaths that we have seen happening from overdose and so on, and that's a little bit scary for lots of people. So it's the one thing we really like about Four Directions is that when you're face to face, it means we get to see you on a regular basis, and so it keeps us in touch with you.
And
Whenever
there's a relationship, right? That's what I'm picking up is it's relationship-based banking.
Very much relationship
transaction-based banking.
Yeah, and we're not transactional. Like, we do transactions, but that is not our mainstay. When someone comes in, like they'll come to our teller station to take out $10, but the next thing we're hearing is, oh, Marg, I want to let you know that, I was just diagnosed with cancer and I have to have surgery. Like, that's what they're telling me at the teller station. They're not telling me, oh, I have to pay this bill or I have to pay that bill. They're telling me what's happening in their life today. And that's, that's the kind of conversations that we have more and more at our counters. The transactions are secondary, like they're just there to tell us, yeah, I want to get a few dollars, but they're really there to connect with us and for us to ask how are things going, and here's our number, can you let your daughter know to let us know how you make out when you have your surgery and things like that. So we tend to go above and beyond. We are not your normal bank. You will hear a lot of things that are said in that bank that are not normally said at other banks, and I think that's good. That's just the way we are, and it's who we are. And we are about community, and that's the core. It is about community and looking after one another and paying attention, and also naming the things that might be right out there, and trying to educate a bit about staying safe, and if you need help, this is where we give a lot of numbers out that have nothing to do with banks. So housing, housing first, homeward trust, like we have all of the list of numbers and contacts that we can give to people where they can go to get other supports. So you don't normally hear that. We get calls from other banks saying, Mark, this guy's asking for such and such. Is there a way for you to, do you know who we could call? And we give them the information. The other thing we have is, I'm sure you've heard of Crisis Diversion, the 24/7 vans. That's a shared process that works between Boyle Street and Hope Mission. And even at the banks, the inner city banks, they used to call police all the time. If someone wandered in, maybe they were under the influence or something, they might have fallen asleep in the chair. And so they would call the police because, well, we can't get rid of them. We need to get rid of them. And what I educated the inner city banks, at least, to say, listen, call Crisis Diversion. They know the inner city community. They'll come in. They'll say, hey, Joey, where do you want to go, bud? Come on with us. We'll take you. Do you need to go to the shelter? Do you need to go? And that is a much better resolution than being dragged out in cuffs from a bank. Yeah. So it's just trying to educate even the financial institutions to understand that, community is not just people walking in three-piece suits trying to do business. It is about every aspect of community, including our vulnerable community. Maybe they're just tired. Maybe they've walked all night and didn't have a place to sleep. And this is the one, they sat down, had a cup of coffee, and they were so relaxed they fell asleep. I'm not insulted by that, whereas some banks are. And we even had a call this past week about one of my colleagues from Oliver Village. He's now a manager at another branch. And he said, Marg, I had some people calling in. They're all concerned about people sleeping in the entryway of the bank. And I said, well, are they causing any, are they bothering other customers? Are they causing any damage? And he goes, no. And that's why it really upsets me. He goes, it doesn't bother me that they're in there and they're not causing any damage. They're just trying to get warm and have a sleep. He said, but then, it only takes one person to complain and make a big deal about it. And he goes, and now I have to figure out what are we going to do? And I just gave him a few ideas about what they could do. But I said, once again, you could call Crisis Diversion. If they know them, they'll ask them to come out. But I said, yeah, it's an ongoing challenge for people to understand that community is every aspect of community. It's not your own little perspective of what it is. You have to see the whole gamut of individuals and understand their backgrounds and so on. But
I would love for banks like that to focus on how to educate their customers rather than asking people to leave.
Well, exactly. And this is the thing, that's the one thing, like people come to visit us, like they come in, they don't even want to go, they don't even ask to take any money out of their account or put money in. They're just like, oh, hey, how you doing? Some of them bring us a cup of coffee. They'll go to Tim's, and if they have a little, and we'll say, you don't have to do that. And they go, oh yeah, we did, because you're always here for us. And so we just wanted to give you a coffee, like it's just nice to have that, that ability to connect with people in a very different way. It's not about money. It's not about your status in the community. Because I've worked, when I did my time at the other branch, believe me, we had people who, they used to say, like, my community, the people I deal with, oh, I would never want to have to deal with your community. It must be so difficult. And I'm like, actually, when I was doing my training, I had more problems with the people who had like thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars in their accounts, as opposed to the people who came in who might have only had $10 in their accounts. Like, it goes both ways. It doesn't matter how much money you have or how little money you have. It's the individual, actually, So I said, you can't really talk about it in that kind of a spectrum. You have to kind of take it as it is and just deal with it. But yes, I think banks need to do a lot more education. And so ATB is really out there. Like this past Christmas, the holiday season, I actually went out and did a presentation to their bank managers and assistant bank managers on suicide prevention, because there was an incident where an individual went into a branch and said that they were going to commit suicide, and nobody knew what to say to this person. They were totally floored. Like, what do you mean? What do you mean? And then they were panicked. And so they said, well, we need to have some education. These things are going to happen and we're not prepared. And so Alberta Treasury Branch is a bit more out there when it comes to wanting to broaden their spectrum about how to deal with customers and how to deal with just social issues of the day. And so, yes, the holiday season is a very stressful time for many people. Sometimes suicides can rise during that time. And it's a very lonely time for lots of people. And just being able to be understanding and, you know, feel that you can have that conversation and check in on safety with people, it's really important. And that's not too much to ask. And the one thing I kept telling them is that you don't need to have a master's in psychology to be able to sit and talk to someone about how they're feeling. And if they're feeling really, really low, here are some areas, here are some telephone numbers or some people they can reach out to really ensure that they're okay and safe. You don't need to have, PhD. It's just a person to person and being able to understand and be compassionate with people. So either you're willing to take the time to do it or you're all about business. And that's kind of how they have to weigh it. And a lot of these financial institutions are more about business and less about people, really. So,
Mark, I do have a question about financial literacy.
okay.
Do you guys, first of all, offer that one-on-one? Based on what you've said so far, it's even taken form of a conversation where you're talking to them about their financial literacy as it pertains to them. But do you offer that maybe in a small group so people can learn from each other and questions from each other too? And
So we do. We actually work with United Way, and it's called Each One Teach One. It's a program that they offer. But we also are educated in, myself and two other staff, we took the Prosper Canada workshops. And so we do offer small workshops. And the workshops from Prosper Canada are a lot more in depth and require a lot more commitment on the side of the individuals to work on their financial literacy. It's not just about, oh, here's a budget and so on. What we do is talk about the relationship you have with money. So a relationship with money is the same as the relationship you have with individuals. So if you have a poor relationship with some people, you may have a poor relationship with your finances. And and there's reasons for that. Like, you know, you're trying to fill a void, so you shop way above what you should be spending. You know, there's all kinds of reasons, but we talk a lot about the relationship of money that you have with that money. And so the Each One Teach One, these workshops are offered by a variety of different financial institution representatives. So it could be anyone. It could be someone from TV or someone from RBC or someone from ATB. It doesn't matter. And they offer their program. We offer individual programs based on within our own community. We'll ask the different departments if you have someone specifically in housing, because we find once they're housed, budgeting becomes even more paramount to keep them housed. So it's one thing to give someone an apartment and get them all set up. It's another thing to make them manage that apartment and manage the costs of living in an apartment. So we do a lot of work with the Housing First community, and we use the Prosper method because it's much more in depth.
And
now,
is it
we also have an, oh, sorry.
Sorry, I just want to clarify the Prosper method. Does that take into consideration barriers to understanding, plain language, accessibility of the words that we're using, and so on?
So what we do is we will assess various clients who will be participating in that workshop. And then if we feel there's someone who really requires more one-on-one, we will go work with them throughout, and we will have an additional staff person there, basically to be around to specifically assist them and ask them questions. And if they, we actually, when we first begin, we tell people, for you to really work through this, you really need to feel comfortable to ask the questions. So if you don't understand, please let us know you don't understand. And we do some one-on-ones because of that, because sometimes people just don't learn well in a huge group. And sometimes their worker will come and let us know that it's, is it possible to do a few sessions with them one-on-one, and we certainly will do that. We have the capacity to do that. The other program we have is called Empower You, and it's a matching program that ATB does and it's in partnership with United Way. And it was specifically for women initially, so women who were finding real challenges. So essentially, they open a bank account and they work through, I think it's a 12 sessions, and it's financial literacy. And then in those 12 sessions during that time, they will deposit funds into their account. And whatever they deposit, ATB actually matches. And then at the end of their 12 sessions, whatever is in their account, they can either keep it there, or they can actually remove whatever amount they want and spend it and get something, you know, that they need. But it is we specifically started with women because we found that they were the most vulnerable in the community. They were having they had a lot more responsibility, specifically with family, and they ended up with a lot more costs and much more difficult to get employment, to find childcare and all of these things. And so we just thought maybe it would be important for us to support them in that. That program actually has expanded to include males as well now. So it's not just Empower You for women, it's for men and women.
Okay.
And so it is a great program, and it's been very, very successful.
Excellent.
Yeah, and then we do have ambassadors at pretty much all the branches now. We have ambassadors that can sign you up on that program and to work with you through it. But we also work with money mentors, and that's something that a lot of people don't understand and don't really know about. Money Mentors is a provincial body. They are at arm's distance from the province, but they are initiated by the province, and they have a debt resolution program. And a lot of people don't even know about this program. So essentially, they can act on your behalf. If you're in a real financial bind and you want to sort of salvage your financial history, you can work with them, and they will act almost like a trustee on your behalf. They will talk to your creditors. They will arrange all kinds of a lot of the financial conversations, let's just say to people that you might owe funds to, and they work with you, and they actually can decrease your debt in a considerable amount of time and by a considerable percentage. And so we refer people who are really interested in rebuilding credit, which is a thing that a lot of our community is struggling with, is trying to rebuild their credit. And we'll refer them immediately to Money Mentors and say, look, this is the program for you. They will work with you. You will find that you'll clear your debt in a lot quicker time. Now, we also offer some products to assist clients in reducing, into building their credit. And right now we have what we call a secured credit card. And so that credit card, you first have to clear all your collections. So we'll assist you in doing that and work with you to set aside money enough to make regular payments to pay these things down. And then we can secure a credit card for you. And the purpose of that card, and we manage it very closely with the client, and we say, look, you can go out and buy something small and you're going to pay it off right away. And the more you do that, the quicker your credit is going to build back up to a place where maybe if you need to get a loan, if you want to look at getting a mortgage, whatever, you're going to have the capacity to be able to do that. But you really have to start from scratch and really work towards building that credit. And it's something that a lot of people run away from and think it's just going to disappear. Unfortunately, it doesn't disappear. If you're trying to, move forward in purchasing bigger items like a house or a home for yourself or your family. But even to get a car, maybe to buy a vehicle, just to be able to drive to get a job, and be more mobile and so on. So we do try to work with them, and we talk very openly about what the possibilities of that is. And so we're trying our best to meet their needs, and we try to protect them from lots of scams and lots of people who are out to try to take them for their money. And that's another thing that's really important for people to be educated on. and to really be aware of a number of scams that are out there that can affect your bank account. It can affect your credit history. And every day it's something new. And they target vulnerable populations all the time. And some of the ways they do this is they will come up to someone who's in our community. And this is someone who's they're stealing money from someone else's account. So they're going to say to you, do you mind if I use your account and I transfer money into your account, and I'll give you $200 of the $1,500 or the $5,000 that I'm sending. I'll give you $200 for you to keep just for your trouble. Well, as soon as you allow someone to do that with your account's considered a mule account. So you're carrying fraudulent money on behalf of someone else. Now, some of our community are fully aware of this, and some of our community have no idea that this is not something they should be doing. So we constantly have PowerPoints playing on our television screen to say, please be aware of these things. And, do not give your account information to anyone for any reason. If you have any questions, come and ask us first to see if it's something safe to do. There are job scams out there. The latest one is for our vulnerable community is that we have people calling in and they're saying they're calling from their pharmacy. And they say, your doctor just sent in a new prescription. And I just want to make sure that all the information, your personal information on our files is accurate. Mm-hmm. Can you tell me what your date of birth is? Can you remind me what your address is? And these individuals will go ahead and give everything, thinking that it's their pharmacy calling. And in fact, it's a fraudulent person. And now they have access to all their personal information.
Yeah, that's
and then they will try everything.
That's happening everywhere, right?
Yes.
It's 8:52, and I have one more question for you because I want to capture this, your response, Mark. There are, like, we're talking about fraudulence and fraudulent situations, and I think one of the major ones is when whether it's a third-party money lender or another bank that has given away a credit card to an individual that may or may not be able to pay, or allowing them to take a loan that they will never be able to pay back. So is there anything that Four Directions does to help those clients who maybe now access Four Directions but are in debt because they were exploited and given credit cards even though they were not approved for it? Like, anything you guys can do to help with past situations with other financial institutions?
What we can do is we can educate them on ways that they can begin to question. So for instance, this was a very common practice that many financial institutions had. If they would go, and the problem is that different places sell the lists of different of individuals. So they might have a whole list of graduates, let's say, that are graduating this year from high school, right? They're going to send out applications or credit cards to the new graduates. Oh, you're getting ready to graduate. You're going to go into university or get a job. Now you're ready to go, right? And actually, some of those graduates are not 18 yet. So they are not of legal age yet to sign documents. But as soon as the credit card comes in, often students don't tell parents, and they go ahead and activate the card. Well, actually, that card is not, it is not possible to actually, they should not even have that card. It's not even legal for them to have that card without their parents' knowledge. So if you can prove that some of this was done with, especially if someone has a guardian or a trustee, and they go ahead and make these arrangements, then that is actually considered a null and void contract because they were not permitted to do that in the first place. They shouldn't have initiated that contract with that individual without understanding the ramifications. So all the parent would have to do, or the individual would have to do, would be to pick the phone up and call that that financial institution or that credit card and basically say, I'm sorry, but unfortunately, my son or my daughter does not have the capacity to make that decision on their own. They had to make it with me. That was not passed by me. And so this credit card is null and void. You cannot, whatever losses you have to face, you're going to have to face on your own. We're not paying them. They will try to harass them. They will try to call. Just ignore them. You do not have to pay that. And actually, if they were, wise, they might be able to get a letter from, sometimes just a letter from their MLA or whatever. Sometimes using politics is the way to go. Sometimes lawyers can do so much, but then they're asking for money too. I always say, if you can go to your MLA and say, listen, this is the problem I'm having. This should not be happening. How can it happen in our community? Believe me, there's going to be action taken. They usually can end it in a few days. Other situations where they have been, they have activated a card or they've used a card and they have incurred debts. People don't understand that just because, let's say your credit card was for $5,000 and you maxed it out at $5,000, okay? That credit card company knows they know they're not going to get that money back. They're not going to get all of that money back. They can try everything they can, but they're not going to get it back. How can they? Most of these people, the individuals, maybe they're not employed. They should have asked. Like, they didn't ask the right questions. They just gave them a credit card. So one of the things they could do is, sometimes they offer them, you know what, the $5,000 you say I owe you, I'm going to give you 10 cents on every dollar of that money that you say I owe you, right? So you come up with this, or you just say, I'm not paying it, because essentially you didn't ask the right questions. This individual should not have had a credit card. You didn't ask them if they were employed. You didn't ask them where they were going to have the funds to pay this. So in actuality, you shouldn't have provided the credit card. They didn't ask for the credit card, you sent it to them, right? And so there are ways to manage some of these situations. They can be very harassing, but all you have to do is basically send them a letter or tell them, please do not call this telephone number again. And there are ways to protect you, and we talk to our clients all about this all the time. If you have debt and they are harassing you and they are calling you and they are making your life miserable, do not talk to them. Do not answer their phone calls. Do everything via mail. Like, don't have any conversations alive with them, like one-on-one. Just put everything in writing and record every time they call you. Like, if you get an answering machine or a voicemail and it's them, because under the law, they're very restricted as to how many times a day they can call you, where they can call you, because some of them will try to call you at work. They'll even call your employer. Like, they will try everything. But in actuality, most of these companies already know that if they give out 10,000 credit cards, probably only a small portion of those, if there's losses, are they going to be able to reclaim. So there's lots. The consumer has a lot of powers. They just need to be educated about the powers that they have.
Okay, this is super helpful. Thanks, Marg. I think it's a whole nother session that I'm thinking about now with you further down the road. Anyway, Karen, did you have any questions?
No, I just wondered, do you guys do different topics every Wednesday?
Yes.
Oh, okay. That's good to know.
Yeah, so what I can do, Karen, is I'm going to, once I can probably end the session right now, and I'm going to send you a link, okay?
Okay,
So
thank
for
you.
our viewers, goodbye. See you at the next session.
Okay,
Thank you.
thanks, Marg.
Thank
Bye. Thank you very much.
Thanks for all the
being here, Karen.
information.
you. Yes.
Yeah,
You're very
thank you.
welcome.
Stop recording. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.